Hi, I'm Brandy Stanley, and this is my presentation on tort liability. First of all, tort is an actionable or civil wrong committed against one person by another, and it is based on the legal premise that individuals are liable for the consequences of their own conduct or lack of conduct when such actions result in injury to others. And people need to understand that they can be held accountable as individuals as well as the district being held accountable. There are two types of tort: intentional or deliberate. Unintentional is generally a result of negligence. The first case I'll talk about is Jennifer Edwards and the Tipton Community School Corporation. What happened is a 13-year-old was riding the school bus, and the driver hit a dip in the road, and she was thrown up into the seat in front of her and suffered a lacerated pancreas. The school district did not train their bus drivers. They were hiring a consultant, so the person that they hired owned their own bus and did training in the county rather than through the school district. So the allegations were that the school failed to train and supervise the driver appropriately, and what happened was that the court found that there was no evidence of negligence on behalf of the driver. There was no proof that they were driving too fast or driving recklessly, and then the school could not be held accountable either for training or lack of supervision, because first they were alleging they did not have duty to supervise, and it was almost humorous that they said, well, first of all, we don't have a duty, but if we did have a duty, we didn't fail at that duty. There was no material evidence that they had not ensured that they were hiring someone safe. They didn't have anything in their background that said that they had any tickets or any case against them that would give them any reason that this person was an unsafe driver. So they found it in the favor of the school. As far as measures that we would take as reactive measures in my district, additional training for drivers, additional education, but being proactive, our district would never hire that out. We hire and train our own drivers, we maintain our own equipment, but we're a smaller school district, so I can see how in a larger district that sometimes that is necessary, but that's something that we would control in the district ourselves. And as far as beneficial ethics, supervising students adequately, maintaining a safe speed for the conditions of the road, just making sure that the drivers that we hire know what the expectations are and know how important that job is. There wasn't any suggestion that the student was doing anything wrong by being up out of her seat at any time, but something like cameras on the bus might be helpful in a situation like this to see if maybe there was behavior that wasn't being caught by the bus driver. It's a tough job to have to watch both. The next case is Patricia Lauren Tuminello, and she filed a suit against Father Ryan High School. It's a real tragic situation. The family alleged that the school was negligent and failed to enforce its own anti-bullying policy, and for violating Title IX. The student who they say was being bullied did commit suicide, and after that happened, they are saying that the school was negligent. However, they failed to provide any evidence of that complaint. In fact, there was documentation to the fact that the principal followed up on every complaint of bullying that had happened, every incident, every run-in with a particular student. There was follow-up, there were meetings, there were phone calls, there was a suspension of a student. I think the documentation in this case became very important because it seemed that the school had done everything that I think would have been possibly feasible to try to remedy the situation. Unfortunately, the outcome was, like I said, very tragic, but in this case, the school was not found to be negligent. Within my building, the reactive measures would be additional training for staff and students on bullying prevention. Proactive measures, responding to all claims of bullying the way they did in this case, providing support for the target of the bullying, as well as counseling and training for the perpetrator. And they did provide that. They had a social worker working with the student who had been harassing the other student. And then beneficial ethics, treating all students with dignity and respect, having the climate of the building being such that that's just not the way we're going to be with each other. Supervision of students to reduce incidents of bullying. We have a very low level of any type of physical disruption at all, but if there are conflicts kind of arising in the building, before it gets physical, there are students coming to us, talking to us about, you might want to talk to so-and-so because I think this is going on. I just feel that we have created that in our building to where students are talking to us if there's a problem, and that's what you want to see to try to prevent any acts of violence. In case 3, James Hopkins Jr. versus Seattle Public School District Number 1. In this situation, a middle school student was hit in the back of the head, punched in the back of the head, and the plaintiff alleged that the school owed a higher duty of reasonable care to protect him from assault. The class had been rowdy. The coach was calling them down on their behavior during class, and then he sent some of the boys into the locker room to get changed, and he stayed back and talked to a few of the boys who were causing problems in class, and that's when the incident happened. So he was not in the locker room at the time. The school claimed that James was somewhat negligent on his part because he was antagonizing the other student. So what came about in the end was that the jury was not instructed on the specific duty of the school district to provide care to prevent the incident. So there was a legality of not providing the right instructions to the jury for them to make a good decision. So this trial was thrown out and there will be a new trial. As far as reactive measures, requiring an adult in the locker room when students are present would be very important. But being proactive, a coach is expected to be in the locker room when students are in there. Can't be in 2 places at one time, so maybe the students could have stayed outside the locker room before coach was ready to go in. So something that they could have done differently. And then also, like I said before, students reporting issues, or sometimes they physically step in and prevent fights when things are getting heated. We have a really good class of 8th graders that have done that to kind of step in and say, hey, it's not worth it. Let's step back. Let's cool down, while somebody else is getting the coach to step in and help them. So supervision cuts down on incidents incredibly often. When we are in the halls, when we're in the locker rooms, when we are where the students are, it really cuts down on incidents. So supervision is going to be key in preventing a lot of these tort cases. Case number 4, Halverson versus Sweetwater County School District. In this situation, another locker room situation, but this was a slip and fall. The claim was that the school failed to operate and maintain the shower facilities in the locker room in a reasonably safe fashion. The floor was wet at the time of the fall, but the school is saying, of course, the floor is going to be wet. Sometimes it's a shower room. There should be a limited amount of water anyway on the floor because they're coming in from the pool, they're showering in that area. There is going to be some water. So the judgment was in favor of the school. They didn't find that they were negligent. As far as reactive measures, clearing any backed up drains and reminding students to be careful when the floor is wet. They didn't find that a drain was backed up necessarily, but just making sure that things are maintained properly will prevent problems like that. And then if there's an excess amount of water, mop up any standing water, keep floor drains clear, and maybe add a texture to the floor so that it's not quite as slick and smooth. And then as far as ethics go, again, presence of an adult to supervise students, warnings posted that the floor is going to be wet, walk slowly, carefully across the wet floor. And in the fifth case, this happened on an elementary playground. A second grade student fell into a concrete window well on the playground. She fell about 5 feet and struck her head and suffered a fractured skull. She has recovered well, but immediately after, for months, there were some problems. She had to have surgery, of course, but she is recovering. Her family alleged that the district failed to supervise the girl well and to provide a safe playground atmosphere, and then additionally that they did not address her injuries appropriately. And the family did recover a settlement, $31,831. And I was kind of surprised that there were not window well covers to prevent falls. That would be our reactive measure, but something to prevent someone falling, especially 5 feet down. That was just surprising to me. Again, teacher supervision. There were teachers on duty, but not close enough to prevent her from falling in. And then reminding students of the hazards on the playground. Beneficial ethics, adequate supervision of students, especially at a young age. The number of adults to students on an elementary school playground is very important. We have to examine, is that adequate supervision? You can't have 3 classes of students with 1 adult and expect them to see everything that's going on. So something to be considered for sure. This is a quote that I think is pretty important. Thou shalt not be a perpetrator, thou shalt not be a victim, and thou shalt never, but never be a bystander. When we're a bystander, we stand by and do nothing. And so we can't take that stance when it comes to tort liability. We have to be ever vigilant and keep our students safe. Here are my references. Thank you very much.